I tried to do the research. And what was the research? I was interested to know how psychosocial aspects and characteristics such as empathy, theory of mind, the tolerance of differences, compassion, suggestibility, these sort of things correlate with our social tendency. In more specific terms, how they relate to our adherence to authoritarianism or democratic values.
Hello and welcome. I'm Abbie. This is Stories Lived, Stories Told, and today I invite you to join me in conversation with Hossein Kaviani as we take a communication perspective on psychology and democracy. To take a communication perspective is to consider what we're making and how we're making it through our communication practices. This means we look closely at patterns, context, stories, and relationships, and that we use curiosity, mindfulness, collaboration, and dialogue to create better social worlds. So whether the topic of today's conversation is familiar to you or not, the hope is that using a communication perspective will reveal new ways of seeing and being for all of us. At the top of the episode, you heard our conversation partner today, Hossein Kaviani. Hossein is a clinical psychologist with a PhD awarded by King's College London, Institute of Psychiatry, Psychotherapy. He is also a researcher and a writer of both novels and psychology books, his latest book being The Valley of Loneliness, which came out just earlier this year. This episode is the last in our engagement series, and I just think it's such a valuable addition to the conversations we've been having so far this month. Hossein draws a really important line and makes a really important connection between democratic values, the ways that we are with each other interpersonally and in our communities and internationally, on a more global scale, with our psychology, the things that are happening inside of us, and really explores that relationship in a meaningful way that helps us understand when we talk about engagement, how we're engaged with our communities, that we also need to be asking how our communities are shaping us just as much as how we're shaping them. Another element of this conversation is that Hossein and I talk about Cosmo Kids, one of the resources from the CMM Institute that I've mentioned on here before. And Hossein has done some really great work with that. And because of that, this episode is dedicated to our dear friend, Merritt, who passed away recently and was so instrumental in the creation of Cosmo Kids, and not just the creation, but their continued life in the world. And to me, that feels very fitting because Merritt is someone who I really respect the way that she would engage. And she certainly modeled for me how I would like to be engaged with other people and how I show up to them. So this episode is for Merritt, and we love her and we miss her. Before we jump into this episode, I also want to ask for your help. As I continue to think about the next season of the podcast, I want to invite you to really co-create that with me. This podcast is just as much yours as it is mine. So I have a short survey linked in the show notes below that you can take, so you can share any of your thoughts. Let me know how you're using the podcast, how you want to use the podcast, what you're getting out of the podcast, what you want to be getting out of the podcast, anything you'd like to share. I'm open to hearing from you. Again, you can find that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for participating if you do. And let's now continue on to this conversation that wraps up our engagement series with Hossein. Hello, Hossein. Thank you so much for joining me for this podcast.
Hello, Abbie. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to be in conversation with you today. I would love to ask you to kick us off by introducing yourself, and you're welcome to do that in whatever way feels right for you. I just want to pose the question to you of what is important for you for us to know.
Yeah, the introduction. So that's very easy. easy part of the conversation today. I am Hossein Kaviani, and I'm a writer, and also I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist. And I've been working over past 30 years in different areas. So I've been teaching at university. As a writer, I've got some psychology things, books or articles, and also I have this teaching in the university in my background. I've been teaching clinical psychology, cultural psychology, cross-cultural studies, things like that. And also, I've been a researcher over the past 25 years. And I always believe that teaching and research needs to be together, and they are some symbiotic. Without one cannot deal with the other one, cannot address the other one. And I always think that if one side is ignorance and one side is knowledge, so in knowledge, we know things. That's a bright side, but the dark side is ignorance, and we don't know things. So, to know things, we need to do something. One of the pathways to shed a light on that dark side is research. And I've been always doing research, and in the classroom also, I've been using the research results in my studies, in my teachings. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I'd be curious to know, can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of research you've done?
Yeah, the research, I've been involved in research which was on cognitive and emotional aspects of, for example, depression, anxiety. And also, I've been involved in some research on a cultural aspect of the behavior. And recently, over the past 7, 8 years, I've been involved in more research on psychosocial characteristics, which correlates with our social tendency. So that was over the past 7, 8 years. That's the research I've been doing. In the past, also, when I was doing my PhD, also I was involved in psychophysiology. Specifically, I've been using that different physiological device to measure it was more experimental work, not the work which I am doing now, which includes both quantitative and qualitative. So at that time, I was just interested in emotional reactivity, human emotional reactivity, and how different things can affect emotional reactivity. I started from that side, and then I try to expand my research on more, because I'm a clinical psychologist, more to do with the patients, and then I moved on to more cultural, and also recently on things that is related to more social cognition.
Yeah, that immediately kind of makes sense to me, that it'd be really rich to explore that relationship between culture and behavior. It feels very CMM-ish to me. We create our social worlds, and also our social worlds shape us back. So I'm sure that is really interesting to dive into. What's compelling about that to you?
Yeah, but perhaps I can tell you that, yes, I'm a migrant. I'm an immigrant living in London, and so I moved out. I've been in Middle East, and so I've been here since 1993, and I moved back for some years, for 4, 5, 6 years there, and again I came back. And so when you're just from one culture and you're living in other cultures, so it's very obvious for you that things are different, the impressions are different, the views are different. They're making, if you want to make sense of things, what people think and what people say, you need to also include the cultural background. If you don't get that cultural background, the information you get is misleading. Okay. So that's why I've been always interested in cultural aspects. Even when I was doing some research on emotional reactivity, on emotional things, also culture is important. Emotion can be expressed in different ways, and culture sometimes, is some factors that determine. the emotional expression. So that is important. I mean, you cannot deal with different things around the world. You cannot decide something in London and then you want to use it in China, or you want to use it in Singapore, or you want to use it in Latin America. No, you need to know the subtle aspects, cultural aspects, which is embedded in the culture. And you need to know more about that to understand how you can. Perhaps I come back to it later. I think in policymakers also have to know, and the psychologists, the sociology, and this sort of cross-cultural studies, which anthropology also can inform the right and correct and valid policy making, strategies. So that is something which I think is very fundamental to know the cultural aspects. Without cultural aspects, we are lost. And it's very misleading, and sometimes it is dangerous.
Yeah. I kind of in the same thread of, shaping and also being shaped. It sounds like your personal experiences have shaped how you approach this work. I'm curious to know, not just the practical applications of this research, but maybe also some of the personal ones. How is this research shaping you in your life and work?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And for these cities and the countries are becoming cosmopolitan, multicultural, and for this multiculturalism it's not a slogan, it's a reality, and for this reality to happen, we need to know, the things about culture, and we have now big ignorance, this dark part, which can lead to disagreements without knowing what is the reason. It can lead to, arguments. It can lead to wars sometimes. So that's very important to know more about cultures, and cultures has to be discovered again, and that's very important. If you are talking about multiculturalism, if you are talking about tolerance of differences, if we are talking about the perspective taking theory of mind, we are talking about empathy, we need to know more about culture. That's why I was interested in culture.
Do you see other research being done around this relationship between behavior and culture?
Yeah, that's very vast, very huge area in psychology and also in sociology. I mean, that's a branch, actually. We call it cultural psychology and cross-cultural psychology. This is not only what I'm doing. It's been the concern and the questions of many scientists in this area, and there are many people, I mean, numerous number of researchers who are interested in that area, and still they are doing the job.
Yeah, I know that one of the ways that you've been involved with helping to take this from theory to practice is being involved with Cosmo Kids with the CMM Institute. I'd love to, kind of, you've introduced yourself. Can you kind of introduce that part of yourself and your relationship to this project and how that evolved?
Yeah, that's a good question, Abbie. I mean, before I come to the Cosmo Kids, which is very important, and I've been doing research on that, and I've been doing some work on that. Perhaps I need to expand on my experiences, my personal experiences, and where I'm coming from, and so then we come to that Cosmo Kids. With this, I need to give you some background. To be able to make sense of why I was interested in Cosmo Kids and what happened. So, I'm coming from Middle East. So Middle East is a geographical area that has been always involved in turmoil, unrest, restless. It is a restless situation, at least our past few centuries, 5 centuries perhaps. And we understand that this historical background can, it can lead to some mindset, people who are living there, that unrest, restlessness, this sort of sense of insecurity can be embedded in our mind. So I'm coming from that side, that part of the world. And for this reason, I always had serious questions in mind. And why is it? Why this happened in that area? And still we have this war going on and in this part of the world. And so that was something which I was interested to know, and I had always questions, and I have always this question that how we can change the situation. The situation is there, but how, as a psychologist, for example, what is it which I can do to contribute to understand the situation, and also my feedback perhaps can help to change the situation. So it is very small, bit of contribution, but still, this is my question, that how we can help the change happen. So I had this in mind, that so we can do something. That was the first motivation I had in mind. And over the past 20 years, so I've been just thinking that what we can do to understand it first, to discover what is going on there, and then based on that information, we can feedback. So that was the experiences which I had in that. And based on those experiences, that is very obvious in the Middle East. So we should do something. This was my first motive, that what can we do? What is the obstacles there? So that was the first notion, the first thing that I was thinking, that how we can convert it to some sort of research question. And then based on the research question, we can have a methodology. And based on that methodology, we can do the research and answer the questions which we have in mind. It doesn't mean that if we do the research, we are going to answer all of our questions. No. You answer some of your questions, but there are some other questions which is raised, and it's more question you have at the end of the.
You're right.
Yes. But anyway, you need to start. So I've been thinking that, okay, we have, on one side we have culture, on the other side we have mind. So there is a mutual and reciprocal relationship between culture and mind. Culture is sort of projected itself into mind, and the mind reflects something on a culture. So whatever we have in this culture, you can see sort of similar things in the mindset of people. Mm-hmm. So that's the relationship between individual and the societies. Okay, we can say that culture is the society's mind, if you like.
Yeah,
that's
right.
But we can say that anyway to understand what I'm trying to say, the point I'm trying to make. So that was interesting to see that what is the relationship, and it is in line with that notion that concept is socially constructed. That's important to know what we have in their people minds and what we have in culture. And so that is, they are just regenerating each other, culture and mind. So you need to know both of them to be able to do something to change it. Otherwise, they just regenerate each other over time, over centuries. So that was important for me, that we can do something. And based on that, we thought that, okay, that is a sense of social responsibility, which we need to think about it, that can lead to change. Without that, change doesn't happen. I come back to sense of responsibility later, perhaps to explain more, to clarify what I'm trying to say. So that was what I was thinking. I was thinking that, okay, if change is going to happen, it should happen in individual level and social level, both of them. Based on that, I tried to design our past 7-8 years, or perhaps more than that. It was 2014. It's now 10 years. So I tried to design some research and get funded. Fortunately, I could do some research supported financially by British Academy. They supported me. I had these proposals. There is a procedure to get a fund. It's not easy to get, but
right.
I was successful. I was successful 3 times to get fund, and I tried to do the research. And what was the research? I was interested to know how psychosocial aspects and characteristics such as empathy, theory of mind, the tolerance of differences, compassion, suggestibility, these sort of things correlate with our social tendency. In more specific terms, how they relate to our adherence to authoritarianism or democratic values. And we did that in Afghanistan. And we published the data in different articles. And we found that there is correlation, and empathy was one of them, or a theory of mind or perspective taking is another one. And also tolerance of difference. These are the characteristics that are correlated with, for example, adherence to democracy or democratic values. So we published the data, and we knew that would be very helpful. We know that the policymakers in that area are ignorant of these sort of subtle factors. And if some of the projects, let's say some of the projects invaded the country, tried to establish some sort of democracy there, but they failed.
Mm-hmm.
You remember some years ago when some of the foreign Western countries just left the country hastily, and the Taliban came on power. That was ridiculous. That was disastrous.
Yes,
people in that country. So that's a failure. Why failure happens? Because they haven't included the subtle factors that is related to psychology or to culture or whatever. And that was what we have done in our research. For example, for 4 or 5 years, we've been involved in those researches and published the data. And then we come to this conclusion that, okay, we have these items, we have these psychosocial factors which we think that are involved if somebody wants to have democracy in that country and get rid of some sort of authoritarianism, which is there also in our mind when you are living there. Okay, you may say that I want democracy, but what you're thinking and how you are behaving is just like a authoritarian view. You do it, this authoritarian view, in your family, with your friends, with others. But sometimes you talk about some intellectual things. You talk about the democratic values. These are important, okay? If you, it was interesting that one of the psychosocial factors which we measured was the egalitarian sex role or gender role, which is important. If you don't believe in the egalitarian role, sex role, that is a problem, okay? And that's the obstacle to something which we call democracy or whatever. So these are the obstacles we need to deal with, address it. So we have these, how we can do something for change. And I just searched for what other people have done. And I've been thinking that perhaps we can have some training packages used in children, adolescents, and we come across Cosmo Kids. And that was the first encounter with CMM. And I contacted Kim and Merit. Merit is not among us anymore. God bless her. Tomorrow, I think, is the funeral.
Yeah,
Already
tomorrow.
know,
I'm
right?
really grateful we're having this conversation right now and get
Yeah,
to be
yes,
thinking
yeah,
about her and honoring the work that she put a lot into.
yes. And we lost her. We lost her actually. Very energetic, very hopeful a lady, which was very inspiring. And we had some monthly meetings sometimes with her, and she's dearly missed among us. So I contacted Merit, came, and we had the Cosmo Kids package, and we translated. We got the permission from Kim and Merit. We translated to the languages which is spoken in Afghanistan. Farsi or Dari is one of them, and the other one is Pashto. So these are two different tribes or two sections in that country, and so we needed to have in both. So we had the translation and we had the new illustrations for them because there are pictures and we need to have it culturally adapted for that purpose in that country. And we have done that. And then we had a pilot study to see if these forms and this package is acceptable and feasible to be used in that culture. And the part of the study was successful. The data shows that it was successful and we could use it. And we were just in the process of getting some fund to use it nationally in Afghanistan, which that thing happened. And so Western countries decided to come out, and the country left in the hands of Taliban. And so our project stopped. So that was the story I was involved, the story which can be part of the CMM as well. And I'm really privileged to have this connection with the people in CMM, and it was very helpful for me so far. Yeah, that was the story.
That's the story.
Cosmo Kids, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, I share that same sentiment. I feel very grateful to be connected to the CMM Institute as well. It's just a really wonderful community. And it makes sense. I appreciate where you started with this story, going kind of all the way back and adding that context that I think is really important. And it helps me understand how you're using psychology truly as a perspective that resonates with me, because that's my approach to communication. And I'm sure there's a huge overlap, between what a kind of quote unquote communication perspective and a psychology perspective would look like or say. And that's why I really enjoy this podcast. And I feel like the kinds of conversations I could have on here are truly endless, because I really believe that you can, show up to any conversation about any topic using a communication perspective, and it's going to reveal something to you. It'll be a new way to approach the conversation, ask the kind of research questions that you've, just talked about. And it's going to show you something new, and it's going to help you understand something and then act into a situation in a new way. And that just feels like endless possibilities to me.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I hear that from you as well. Yeah.
I'm very happy that you see the importance of the idea.
Well, also, I think the other thing that really sticks out to me in the story that you just told is this emphasis on, you talk about kind of the responsibility to act into our social worlds. And I appreciate that language of the responsibility. And for me, kind of before that responsibility is the belief, I think, that you can
Yes.
act into your
Yes.
social world and make change. In the language of
Yeah.
CMM, talk about being an active, curious participant. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's something I don't take for granted. That, I think there's a lot of people, a lot of the kind of systems we live under would have us believe that the things that we do don't really matter and that we as individuals are not capable of making change. So I think that's a huge mental shift in our psychology
Yes.
to believe and to see ourselves as participants. And
Mm.
from there to, take on and adopt this responsibility to have this kind of moral imperative to act into
Yes.
our social worlds in a way that would change them for the better.
That's right. And that is very necessary for change, social change. If we talk about the better social world, which we say
Mm-hmm.
in CMM. So I think that sense of social responsibility is very important. But before sense of responsibility, what I understand, empathy is the core
Mm-hmm.
concept. Without empathy, you cannot go anywhere. You
Yeah.
cannot reach what you want to. For change, you need first we need empathy, and empathy is the core thing. And but empathy is necessary, but is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we are talking about change, we need to include other factors.
Yeah.
That one of them, which is very basic, is the awareness. Ask ourselves if we are aware of the situation, we are aware of what we are going to change, what is to change there, what's going on there. Without awareness, you cannot get anywhere. It's just a futile, effort. For fruitful effort, you need awareness.
Yes.
But still, awareness is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
There are other factors which we need, and the main factor is sense of responsibility, social responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this kind of like unpacking. We need this, but to have this, we need this. And the thing that
Yes.
I would add to, empathy, you need imagination. And that is such, CMM-ish language to me. And that's where, stories come in and meaning
Mm-hmm.
making, because
Yes.
stories are how we're making sense of the world. And the more stories we hear, the more we interact with others who have different perspectives, different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
different experiences than us. I think that the function that serves is expanding the imagination
Yes.
so that you can lean into the empathy, lean into the responsibility, and on and on and on.
Yes. And it said social responsibility is something which is very important. And then if we are talking about change, so we have these, multifactorial things there. I mean, the empathy, we have awareness, still we have social, still there is something missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this social responsibility is an impetus, okay? Is a vehicle, is something that is a catalyst for a planned action.
Mm.
Okay, so that would be something which I think, if you ask me how you define, better social world and how we can get there, so I can tell you that would be my thinking. I'm thinking in this way that we need all of these and we need to aware we need to be to feel that what we are doing in our life can affect other people's life. So the way we are behaving, the way we are talking, the way we are thinking, so had some ramifications and implications for the society, for other people who are in it. So that would something which help us to act better socially.
Yeah. Yeah. As you talk about how you define a better social world, it sounds to me like really embodying and embracing democratic values would be a part of your definition of better social world. So I wonder if you could take a moment and explain what you mean by democratic values.
Yeah, the democratic values, which I think it's perhaps you just find yourself in a society which people, respect each other, that there's a rule of law, that people are just responsible towards the law, and also this empathy will help you to see each other's needs. But democracy goes beyond that. Would be something that help us to organize a society, which in that society different organizations are acting, but they also should act in terms of democratic values, in terms of the equality, in terms of the respect, in terms of the need to help people to develop. And also, in my mind, democracy goes beyond that. I mean, we cannot say we are democratic inside our society, but internationally, it doesn't matter. We don't need democracy. We are just thinking about our interests, our own interests. So if we needed to have a better social life, so democracy is something inside the society, it should be also outside the society. I mean, that internationally, between countries, between societies. And so there is still a long way to go to get there. We are, I think, at the beginning of the story of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a long way to go to get there as a society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that in this larger story you've just told? Can you talk about this jump between the research you're doing and seeing this need, this, responsibility, and going, okay, it's kids that we need to have these conversations with?
Yeah. I think everybody in the society needs that training.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are, you just put your finger on a very important point. I believe that educational systems are a bit ignorant in terms of this sort of, requirements. We talk about empathy, but we don't see the empathy in our curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you and I both are in fields that feel very much undertaught in schools.
Yeah, yes. Still, we don't know how we enhance
Mm-hmm.
students in a school, before school, preschool students, this sort of empathy, tolerance of difference, this sort of seeing the egalitarian sex role or other things, respect for law and regulations, that's something which is missing, which is lacking in our educational system.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say that perhaps no, we don't need that in the educational system. Perhaps family is important and family needs to. But families are parents. They were not in that way educated, trained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this kind of empathy and the implications which it has, we need a system. We need an educational system to include that in their curriculum, in syllabus, in whatever they have. So at the moment, I don't see that in educational systems, unless you tell me that there are some states they are thinking about that or that, but I'm not aware of that. So that would be something which we need to work on. Working with educational systems, trying to raise their awareness about these sort of very subtle factors which are lacking in our educational systems, in our teachings. And so that would be something which we need to work on. And that's why I said that there are many things missing, and we are just at the beginning of the road path, the road to the democracy and to the peaceful society and the society that, which is a bit romantic, but it is achievable. If we go that way and gradually we will. When we get there, we don't know.
impression is that it's just very much taken for granted that children will learn at home or somewhere along the way, things like empathy, like, productive communication skills. And I think those things
Yes.
have been kind of implicit or taken for
Yeah.
granted for so long that people don't realize that they can be taught very explicitly, very intentionally. And so there's maybe a little bit of
Yes.
resistance from that end of
Yes.
people not having the imagination to be able to think about what it would look like to really intentionally teach something like empathy in a classroom.
That's right. And that is more serious and more necessary perhaps in countries like Afghanistan or some other countries, which is, which for example, Afghanistan has been involved in wars and killings and, bloodsheds and, this sort of invasions and different things for perhaps about 50 years. So the traumatic events change their life, change their mind. I mean, and it's not only Afghanistan. There are many countries
Yes.
who had this trauma in their life. It's embedded in their mind, in their life, so in their feelings. So that is more important, much more important, to have these sort of educations in those societies, and we need to think about it. And still, we are not hope. I mean, we are still. I'm still hoping that one day we can continue our job in what we were doing in Afghanistan. We are going to resume that, and I'm hopeful about that. Without hope, you cannot, survive. So still, I'm thinking that I'm hoping that would be something which we can do in the future. But so I'm just talking about these. Perhaps some of the people are just listening to us, so they may think that they want to do similar things somewhere else, and it's important to do that. So if we can do it, we need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to transition us into talking about more of your work, to say that, as you are waiting and hoping that this work will resume, you're certainly not, sitting around. One of the recent things to emerge out of your work and your research is your most recent book. Would you talk about that?
Oh yeah, my recent book. That's thank you for reminding me this. The book I published recently is a novel, including 4 interconnected stories, and so that book is somehow related to social responsibility, as we discussed now, and somehow related to their destiny. And what are the factors in the destiny, life, death equation, destiny equation? So, if you just look at the philosophical approaches or in psychological approaches, you may find approaches who are deterministic and approaches who are not. So, in psychology, for example, psychoanalysis and behaviorism, both of them still, however, they are opposites. There's a big disagreement theoretically between these 2 approaches. They don't like each other, but both of them are sort of deterministic in terms of what is the underlying, factor for human behavior. In psychoanalysis, the psychoanalysts say that people behavior and what people are doing are determined by the unconscious drives, things like that. So they think that we have, there is little we can do And this is not our destiny. Our behavior is not in our control. And also behaviorism, they believe that the human behavior is shaped by the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So self is nothing here. But the other approach, which is a humanistic approach, or like existentialism or things like that. So people like Carl Rogers and other humanist psychologists, they believe in free will. They think that self can do something. This is the self that determine and shape their behavior, their destiny. These are two extremes, okay? And in this book, I'm trying to bring in the interplay of four factors. The first is self. We decide, we behave consciously, okay? We make some decisions, we come to some conclusions, okay? So that would be our role in our destiny, in life and death. The other thing, which is not in our control, is the culture. We talk about culture, okay? So the culture sometimes is dictating things. You are living in a cultural context. People expect you to do things, father, mother, uncle,
Mm-hmm.
friends, and you are just, you're. It's not in your control. They are just dictating things. The culture is dictating things to you, and you just behave and think based on what culture tells you to do. And sometimes it is not, you just do it without knowing. So the other factors would be perhaps the higher up decisions, the regulations, the law, and this, which is not in control and that can affect our destiny, can affect our life and death. Okay, in some countries, for example, any countries, the rules, the regulations, bad regulations can have bad effect. The good regulations, these sort of things, which is not in our control. And the other thing is accident. Accident is not in our control. So I've got four interconnected stories in that book, the book is called The Ballet of Loneliness. So in each story, one of these factors is highlighted. I was just trying to raise this awareness that there are other factors which we need to be aware of that. And the sense of responsibility, social responsibility, is coming from these. And I've got this concept there that whatever we are doing is going to affect other people. It's going to affect, it's not, if somebody dies or somebody, something happened to, perhaps there was things that we've done in that chain of events. Okay. So I try to focus on this based on a novel I've written. So that would be a kind of 4-factor equation there.
Mm-hmm.
Why novel and literature? There are two reasons. First is I've been involved when I was younger, for example, in my 20s, I had books and novels and stories published. But then I was not that active in that part, but always I've been in touch with literature, reading novels. And then I think that that would be something we can do if we have experiences here, and these experiences are there. So we need to use it in different forms.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes from my responsibility. That I feel that I'm responsible to what I learned. Just try to present it, try to put in a framework, and just try to say that. And perhaps there are some people that who are interested to see and there are minds and people that perhaps they find it interesting, and it may make sense to some people. So that's why the last book is about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's taking me back to what I said earlier, that, a one function or purpose of storytelling is expanding our imagination. And I was referencing more, me being in conversation with you and hearing the stories of each other's lives, but that's just as true for novels and, fiction that we read. And I have really enjoyed some great fiction this past year. And it's just got me thinking about the impact of even a fictional story for your own psychology, and that expanding what you believe to be possible for yourself, or expanding your understanding of ways of being in the world. So I certainly see that and really appreciate that. And I think the other thing that I'm pulling out of what you've just said is this real kind of commitment it seems that you had in this book, and I would say in your other work, as you described, to holding space for this real complexity of the relationship between all of these different elements, these, 4 different elements in your book that you described. And I think that is so important for that to be one of those stories, so that we can expand our imagination and our capacity to engage in complexity, because the fact of the matter is our social worlds are incredibly complex, and we have such a tendency to try to oversimplify it, because I think we're not, again, kind of going back to what we talked about around schools and what is or is not taught. I don't think we're really equipped to navigate complexity confidently. So we default to trying to oversimplify it. And that's, I've heard that as a critique of the CMM theory, that it's so complex. And there's, maybe some truth to that. And that's why my work is, a lot about making it more accessible. But it certainly shouldn't be simplified, because if it's going to say anything meaningful into a complex social world, it has to kind of mirror or match that, complexity in a way. So that's another thing I'm hearing out of your book, and then all the other work we've talked about too today.
Exactly. The reason for simplification is, at the beginning of this conversation, I talked about the balance between ignorance and knowledge.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we have some knowledge, and we don't know things. That's why, instead of going to shed a light on that darkness, which is ignorance, and find more and understand more, and then try to have a more complex justification or explanation for phenomenon, we just try to simplify that. That's the easy job to do. Ignorance is not bad in its own way. I mean, ignorance is ignorance, but ignorance is our motivation to learn more, to know more, to find more things in that darkness. So the balance between these two, perhaps trying to have balance between knowledge and ignorance, perhaps just help us to avoid simplification and simplifying the complex and complicated, sophisticated things.
Yeah. And that is, you're taking us full circle, and I appreciate that. And everything you've shared about your writing experience is drawing out some more themes, to going back to the conversation we just had about Cosmo Kids, and why you would feel a need to engage with young people as they're developing, to try to integrate some of these tools that would help them navigate complexity from the start, so they don't, become adults like us who are trying to figure it out much later and, have to do some rewiring instead of starting with that good wiring.
Exactly. That's a very important point.
Yeah. Well, Hossein, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today. I've really enjoyed it so much. And just as we wrap up, is there any last things you want to share?
That was I was trying to say that change is possible, is there, but there are some requirements before that. So empathy is very important. The first thing, the core thing, and then we need to be aware of different things. So you shed a light on that ignorance part, and then we come to this sense of social responsibility, which can be a kind of vehicle towards the a planned action for future.
Yeah, that's a great summary of what we talked about, and also what I'm really hoping people will take away from this conversation. So, Hossein, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to be in
so much, Abbie.
Conversation with you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, that is all for our conversation with Hossein. At the end of each episode, I like to offer questions to reflect on, which act as a next turn so the conversation doesn't stop just because the episode does. Today, I'm going to prompt you to reflect on that relationship that Hossein talked about between culture and behavior. If you're bringing that into your awareness, what are you learning from that? So reflect on how your culture is influencing your behavior, and also how your behavior is influencing your culture, and try to bring some of those things into your awareness. So that's kind of broadly the place I would have you start in your reflecting. And then the real question I want to ask from there, once you've kind of stepped into awareness, is how can you be embodying democratic values? So both personally and socially on larger scales, what does that look like for you to embody and embrace? You can reach out to me to share your reflections as well as any of your own questions or ideas. And there's a couple different ways you can do that: through email, the website, by commenting on Instagram or YouTube, or by commenting on the CMM Institute Substack under this episode. Links to all those places are in the show notes to make it easy for you. The reason that I invite you to share your reflections is to stay in dialogue with me, such an important value of CMM. Other great ways to keep dialogue going are to follow the show wherever you listen, leave a rating and review, share this episode with someone you want to invite into the conversation, and take that survey that I mentioned earlier. I am supported by the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution. This podcast is just one of many initiatives of theirs that is all a part of empowering us in our communication so that we can create better social worlds. One of our initiatives that I'm also involved in is, like we talked about Cosmo Kids today, we're taking our next turn in that series, which is Cosmo Parenting. That's a podcast that's going to start coming out January 2025. The trailer is out now. You can subscribe to the Cosmo Parenting Substack. So if you are parenting, definitely check that out. I think those will be really valuable resources. Or if you know someone who's parenting, send that along to them. They can go ahead and listen to the trailer and subscribe. And we'd be really, really grateful to have you be involved in that journey with us. Links to everything CMM Institute are in the show notes, including Cosmo Parenting and the Cosmo Activities website, if you're interested in learning more about what Hossein and I have talked about today. The translations that he worked on are all available for free on that Cosmo Activities website. Again, just in the show notes. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious, and thank you for being a part of this story. I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told.